guys, how would you like to be brutally murdered? And they're like, okay. They end up victims of the bad guys with their permission. One of the characters in my fourth book, Grand Prix Affair, the character did not meet a pleasant end. So I'm like, sorry, he had to go. He's like, I don't know how to take this.
Hello and welcome to the Thriller Pitch Podcast, the director's cut of the thriller book world. I'm your host, Mark Nadon, and joining me today is Robert Adamcik, author of the espionage thriller, The Wave Force Affair. Bob, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about your book, The Wave Force Affair. Let's start with the pitch.
All right, well, Wave Force Affair is a thriller and espionage novel, and this particular one has a bit of a family twist, as my team of agents, led by the epitome of the gentleman spy, Charles Bryce Axworthy, attempts to find a missing husband that's a friend of theirs. He encounters something that he shouldn't have seen, and the nefarious forces are after him.
All right. So what sparked the idea for this story?
Well, this particular edition of the Martini Squad Adventures was based on a lieutenant I used to support. My day job, I'm a defense contractor. I'm a test engineer. And one of my lieutenants who I support is named Molly. She's like the character in the book. And she told me how she met her Costa Rican husband at the Naval Academy. He was one class behind her. He was an exchange student. And he's one of those classically handsome Latin American, dark-skinned, tall, dark, handsome kind of guys. She was a brown-eyed, blonde, all-American looking girl. And I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. So I kind of took that and ran with it for this particular book.
What about the tech and stuff that you had in the book?
Oh, that's lots and lots of research. Oh. I'm like, weapons, cars, especially the cars. My previous series, the Gargoyle series, I was notoriously hard on my cars. My second book, I dropped a body on top of a Bentley Continental GT Speed. Ow. Okay. Things like that. But all the weapons, everything else, researched extensively. And also, Google Maps. You asked questions about rabbit holes. I get on rabbit hole on Google Maps between tracing routes for potential car chases and things like that. And also, I find hotels. I could tell you the best hotels and the best restaurants in Andorra right now, based on the research for this particular book.
Okay. So when you wrote this book, this is book 2. What was the process like writing this book?
Well, once I got the idea from my conversations with Molly, I just sat down. I was like, okay, her husband's job is actually a aviation consultant, in this case for the real company Dassault, which is what Wave Force is based on. And I'm like, okay, what would Dassault have that would interest an adversary party? And I'm thinking, okay, drones, because that's the big thing right now. And I took that and just ran with it.
And the process itself, are you just writing? Do you wake up in the morning, particularly with this book, and just start writing to figure out, or are you doing research at the same time? How does that whole process build for this book?
Oh, I write, and then if I'm like, okay, I need to research a weapon, or I need to research someplace for the team to stay, then I'll stop, do the research, take some notes, and then get back into the writing.
And was this book, like, it has a kind of classic spy thriller, because you're talking about the cars, the feel of the characters and the jokes they tell. It has a very classic feel in a modern environment with modern technology. How did you balance that when you were writing it?
I said one of my favorite authors is Ian Fleming, and one of the things I learned reading his books is the sweep. And that's what I attempt to recreate with my books. Very fast-moving, but also very detailed as far as the who's, the what's, and the where's. And I just keep writing, and basically until I'm done.
Okay. What kind of challenge did this particular story present for you, if you felt challenged along the way?
Making sure I got the technology right for the drones, because my background in the Navy, I was a ship driver, surface warfare officer. I wasn't an aviator or anything like that, and the programs I support now are more on the command control, communications, information technology type thing. So doing all the research for the drones and things of that nature was probably the biggest challenge for this book. Plus, my publisher was like, "Hey, Bob, you may not want to mention people's real last names and the company's real names." I'm like, "Okay, fine." I had to come up with a new last name for the characters and a new name for the company, because the original title was the Dassault Affair. And the publisher's like, "Oh, you better not use that name." I'm like, "Okay, fine." But other than that, I think this is one of the funnest books of the 5 I've written so far on my fiction side. Obviously, because the characters are based on friends of mine and all that. But I think this one's probably the most fun I've ever had writing a book.
Do your other books also bring in real world characters and people, or was that unique to this book?
It depends. One of the characters in my 4th book, Grand Prix Affair, the name was based on somebody I work with, and the character did not meet a pleasant end. So I gave the gentleman a copy of the book. I'm like, "Sorry, you had to go."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I don't know how to take this." Hey, don't worry, just friendly. Yeah. And he was good with that. But yeah, I like to use names of people that I know and I like. The character Angel, she is based on a person I worked with when I was supporting Commander Naval Air Force's Atlantic. Her name was Angel Brown, Yamalet. And in her particular case, she was a retired Navy lieutenant commander like me, but she was a administrative, what we call a limited duty officer. She rose up through the enlisted ranks as a yeoman and got her commission and then retired as a senior administrative officer. And she received her call sign Angel when she was an admin officer for a fighter squadron. And I'm like, "Ooh, that sounds cool." So yeah, I borrowed her name and put her second in command of my team.
And how do you approach telling someone, or I guess you ask them, "Is it okay if I use your name?" Which I would assume you do. What about the likeness? Are you thinking about their personality and what you know of their personality, or is it just, "I'd like to use your name. I want you to know that I know this is not you, the person. This is just you, your name."
Again, except for that one character I just mentioned, all the characters I base on real people are really nice characters. So none of them have ever had a problem with me using their particular name. But yeah, if I can, I'll say, "Hey, I'd like to use you in a book. May I?" He's like, "Oh yeah, sure." In fact, my 6th book that I'm writing right now, that is tentatively titled The Incel Affair, 2 of the victims are 2 lieutenants that I work with, and I approached them like, "Hey guys, how would you like to be brutally murdered?" And they're like, "Okay." So yeah, they end up victims of the bad guys in this next book with their permission. And likeness wise, yeah, pretty much describe them as they are in real life.
Awesome. So fans of this show will recognize, if they read The Way Force Affair, a few people that have been on the show: Andrew Warren, Brian Drake, Aidan Bailey, who met in Forge. Or I shouldn't actually, sorry, I won't include spoilers, but poor Aidan.
I use Andrew's name in my 3rd book, which was the Final Strike. Was the 3rd book of my Gargoyle trilogy. He promoted me to Admiral in Code Green, so I returned the favor and made him an aircraft carrier commander in that book.
Awesome. When readers finish the book, what do you hope they're thinking or feeling as they wrap up the
I just hope they had fun. As much as I love Andrew's Thomas Kane series, and it's really exciting, sometimes it can be a bit of a downer because he's lone wolf kind of guy. Same with Aidan and Sugarman and Brian and Sam Raven. They're all lone wolf guys, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I want I want to be able to have fun. I want the characters to, like the end of the classic Bond movies. Bond's with the girl having a drink, good to go. Next, bring on the next guy.
Is that part of is that how you write with all your books? Is bringing that like team environment, that fun?
Yeah, that's at least these first 5 that I've written. The current one, it's a little darker just because of the subject matter. So, readers, if they pick up my next book, I'm about halfway done with it right now. And they're going to notice a slight tone shift, only because of the nature of the criminals, the nature of the threat, and it's just a little bit darker.
Do you feel like your military experience and having that that team dynamic from the military is what kind of pushed you to in these books, not pushed you to, but inspired you to create that team dynamic from a spy perspective.
I served on 6 ships in my 20 years of commissioned service in the Navy, and all the wardrooms I've worked with, the chief petty officers mess, the enlisted crew, everybody I've worked with was just awesome. And I tried to, exemplify that spirit of, you're a crew, you're a family into my books. And like what the expression says, write what you know.
Yeah.
So I know how to be part of a team and part of a crew.
Were there any points in the book that you changed in later drafts?
No, not really. The way I write, I write, I start thinking, okay, well, what do I need to do next? And I might have 2 or 3 courses of action running through my head, but I'll decide on the course of action that I want to use before I put finger to keyboard. So unless my publisher wants me to make any serious changes, like in my first book, Nautical Strike, the two villains are father-daughter, and I had their relationship a little bit more intense than what is acceptable in the general mass market book. So I had to kind of tone that down a little bit. But otherwise, I run the potentials through my head, and then I put it down on paper.
After this book, there's an afterword at the end where you thank a number of people. When I see like family members or wives or kids thanked, I always like to ask what their role was, because I think it's so crucial and interesting how different people are supported in this author journey, from wives and children, and how that experience plays out. So what was that? Did that play out for you? Is your wife, let's say, your biggest cheerleader? Is she reading your books? How does that play out?
I'm not sure she reads my books because she's not a big thriller espionage person, but she definitely indulges this particular hobby of mine. And pretty much along that line, my siblings are always awesome. They read everything I write. Lots of encouragement on the sibling side, both my siblings and my in-laws. In fact, my late brother-in-law was always a fan, and I dedicated my second book to him, Personal Strike, just before he passed away back in 21. So, definitely the encouragement helps. And, of course, a lot of my friends out there, not just thriller writer friends, but high school acquaintances, old shipmates, they just love my work.
Do they ever, when they read do they read late stage work or early stage work, the people that your family?
Oh, I've never had a family member actually look at a draft.
Okay.
It was always after it's been published and out in the world.
What was the hardest part of writing this book from the idea to publication?
Well, like I said, this is one of the funnest and actually one of the easiest. I think just the idea of trying to figure them out, the geography of where they're going to be. Because I've never been to Andorra, and after my research, it'd be a really cool place to visit. But I had to figure out, okay, how do I get the heroes from the States to Andorra? What's the roads and all that? And also, part of the book takes place in Tokyo. So I had to do a little bit of research on hostess clubs, because that's where a big portion of the story takes place. And because I've never been to one of those before, so I'm like, what's going on here? Okay. And so, basically it's just research, make sure I get the details right. Because if I don't, I know I'm going to hear about it. Because that's how I kind of hooked up with Andrew and Brian. I'm like, hey guys, I'm retired Navy. By the way, when you did this was wrong. And if you please have any questions about Navy stuff, let me know. And that's how I got to be friends with Andrew and Brian.
Awesome. That's helpful to have a team like that behind you, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
So research was one part. What about characters? How do you build characters? Because now instead of the lone wolf, you actually have a team. I imagine they come back throughout this series. How do you separate their voices when you're writing them? How do you start a character and build them into the story?
Let's say for Grand Prix Affair, I had 2 characters with the last name of Vaughn, Michaela and Connor. One of them was the IT guy, and the other one was the team sniper. And I'm like, okay, they got the same last name. Obviously, their call sign is going to be the twins. But what's going to make them a little different? Well, the way I made it different was the computer guy was tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and the sniper was a petite African-American woman. So the call sign twins was obviously something very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Senior moment here, sorry. Yes, something very contrary. And, little inside puns like that. Again, when I created Angel, again, based on a very nice person I worked with, but her background was, okay, what if I took one of the Dora Milaje from the Black Panther movies, made her a Navy SEAL, and put her in here? And that's what I based Angel's appearance and demeanor on. I can't remember the actress's name, but she's one of the, not the lead Dora Milaje, but like the number 2 person with the really intense eyes. I can't remember the actress.
I'm not good with names.
Yeah. And I saw her in Black Panther, Civil War. And I'm like, ooh, she's kind of cool. What could I do with that? I put Yamlet's name to that actress and the background of her being the first woman to graduate from Buds. And there you go.
Do you do this before you start writing the book, or do you do this as you're writing, or as you need characters, you develop them?
As I need them. I'm not going to, spoilers for our Grand Prix affair, but the computer guy doesn't survive that particular book. So I needed a new guy for Wayforce affair, and I have this great website I go to that helps generate names if I'm not using somebody I know. And I'm like, okay, I've got African American characters, white guy, Puerto Rican, okay, and looked up Puerto Rican name, and there you go. And this computer guy is not exactly your average guy in the chair with the glasses and the energy drink. He's a former Air Force PJ, pararescue guy. The team doesn't know that at first. They just think he's another guy in the chair. All of a sudden he starts showing marksmanship skills above and beyond what a normal computer guy would have. And it reveals that, he's a Air Force pararescue, which is, for those who don't know, that's the Air Force contribution to the JSOC. That's Air Force Special Operations. And some of them are pretty close to Tier 1 operators for their particular mission. Mm-hmm. So I went ahead and did that. And that idea came to me based on a conversation I had, about 20 years ago. My wife and I were in Nassau at the Sandals Resort, and one of the people we had dinner with one night, the guy was a PJ. And he mentioned that during dinner, and I'm like, whoa, because no one else around the table knew what an Air Force PJ did, but I did. So I figured, okay, let's have that same sort of reaction throughout the course of the book.
What about their characters in the backstory? Do you build a backstory for the character, things that they've been through, and on the personal side?
Yeah, like for Charles, my lead, who also is, by the way, based on a real person, fellow Bond fan who I've actually met in real life, great guy. Again, the epitome of the gentleman spy. And he has a sibling and things like that, so I kind of incorporate that into the story. And eventually I'm building to a point where that background is going to become part of, if not the main story for one of my books further down the line.
Okay, so you're already well ahead.
Oh yeah.
How far ahead do you plan your ideas? Are you just jotting down ideas and you're like, hey, book 5, book 6, book 7?
Yeah. Actually, I'm working on jotting down ideas for book 6. Let's see. I think I actually answered that question. Let's see. Oh yeah, I heard about this place called Bohemian Grove. It's this retreat where the rich and powerful of the world hang out for some form of retreat every year. I heard about that on some YouTube video I saw. I'm like, that could be the setting for my next book. And wrote that down. Things of that nature. So yeah, if something strikes me that could potentially be interesting for a book, write it down, file it away, and try for the next one. If it doesn't relate to anything I'm working on right now.
Do you feel yourself as you're going for a walk or something where you just see something and you're like, that makes a good idea, that makes a good character?
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to write it down with, so I got to make sure I remember it, because I just turned 59 last week, and my memory is not the way it used to be, so I got to make sure I get home and jot it down before I forget it, and then remember it for next time.
I have a question from Susan Walters, who was the last guest on the show. She asked, do you have any unsold novels sitting in your desk, and is there a plan for it?
Hi, Susan. And no, I don't, because I pretty much, since I have a day job, I just basically write one book at a time. I don't have, a draft, halfway done and then another draft, 10% done or anything like that. I write a book, get it to my publisher, get it out the door, then I start working on the next one. So, at least for my particular case there, Susan, no.
And this book is the second book in the series, but this is the fifth book that you've published. Are there books that you've written prior to all that?
Actually, before I started doing the fiction thing about 10, 15 years ago, I was doing the nonfiction thing because my degree's in history, and I have a big interest in the space program. So my first two books I ever had published were histories of the Space Shuttle orbiters Discovery and Endeavour. And when those first books came out, it was just at the right time. It was right at the end of the program, especially the one on Discovery. After I released a book on the Endeavour in 2014, the interest in the program was to the point of no one was really interested in the third book I had started on, the history of the Atlantis. So my writing kind of took a backseat for a while. Then during the pandemic is when I picked it back up again because I had a lot of time on my hands, and I was reading a lot of books. That's how I started with Andrew and Brian during the pandemic. And well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm reading a lot. Maybe I should try writing one. And actually the one turned into three, the Gargoyle trilogy. And the characters in the Martini Squad I spun off from those first three books.
How do you approach research because you mentioned research, you mentioned you do Google.
Oh yeah.
Are those the main, is it just a Google rabbit hole of research that kind of goes from website to website to website?
That's where I start. I've also found some great YouTube videos on the Mark 6 patrol craft that I use in Final Strike. Found some great videos on that. Also, in my first book, I used the Sockar boats, the Riverine boats that what we call the dirty boat guys, the Swicks, use for Riverine. They carry a crew of 4 and 8 SEALs, and found some great videos on that. And also some of my personal connections with the Navy. For Final Strike, I had 2 Mark 6 boats in the well deck of a LSD-41 class, a Woodby Island class amphibious ship. And one of the people I work with in my day job was first lieutenant on one of those, and he turned me on to the well deck manual that explained how those boats are stored in a LSD class well deck and how they're tied up and how they exit the well when they launch and all that. And I took that information that he provided and put it in the book, and then I also included him as another character. He was the ship's bosun. On I think it was Carter Hall was the ship I used for that book, and he was the guy who actually controlled the well deck and launched those craft for me. So,
how do you balance when you talk about these things in your book, making it clear to the reader what it is without overwhelming them with the technicalities? I know part of the genre is the technicality, so there is an element of that in the genre.
That's a balance, and if somebody's doing a beta read for me, I'll get the feedback hey, you may want to turn down the technical jargon a little bit, because I always prided myself in that I could write these things in a way that the average person can understand it. Even with my nonfiction work on the shuttle, I tried to scale back the acronyms and the lingo and everything else as best I could. Mm-hmm. But somebody, if I have it a little too much, my beta readers will tell me to back off a little bit. I'll do a little tweaking and I'll carry on.
Okay. What advice would you give someone who just published their first or second book?
Beware of marketing scammers. I'm serious. My inbox gets flooded with them.
Yeah.
I usually tell them to bugger off and block them and carry on.
Yeah. You're talking about the book club. Well, book clubs, I guess, are currently the most popular
clubs,
thing.
People are like, hey, we can help you boost your Goodreads score and things of that nature. Just give us money. I'm like, no, I'm not. If you don't want to do it, help me do that for free. Don't bother. Get out of here.
What about on the advice on the creative side?
Again, just write what you know. That's the best advice I can give anybody. Don't try to do something out there unless you really want to spend the time in doing the research. So you just write what you know.
If you can pick one thing that you felt has led to your success so far, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Just persistence. Sometimes, I read the reviews. All of them are great. Some of them are not so great. And I just put the not so great ones behind me, take the lessons learned from them, and apply them as necessary. But just keep going.
Just keep writing the next book.
Just keep writing.
And where can listeners find your book and hear more from you?
Oh, okay. Well, all my books are on Amazon, the Barnes & Noble, both hard copy and e-copies, available all the various outlets. And I have a Facebook page. It's Robert A. Adamcik -author. That's how you can find me on Facebook. And if you want to email me regarding book stuff, it's gargoyle.morgan@gmail.com. Gargoyle was the call sign for my protagonist in my first 3 books, James Robert Bob Morgan. And he got that call sign because of a conversation I had with my commanding officer on the Baton. Captain Howard was an amazing captain, probably the best CO I ever worked with, and I worked with over a dozen in my career. He was a former F-18 pilot, so H-6 intruder and F-18 pilot. Went from the intruder to the Hornet. And I'm on the bridge. I was his navigator, and I'm on the bridge. I'm wearing a set of Gargoyle wraparound shades. Of course, Captain Allard, being the aviator he was Ray-Ban guy. And he sees the brand of sunglasses I'm wearing, and he's like, I should call you Gargoyle. I'm like, Skipper, that's an outstanding call sign. Thank you. And he's like, never mind. I'll just call you a gator because I was his navigator. But I remember that conversation and used that for the call sign for the hero of my first book. And so hence gargoylemorgan@gmail.com is the email ID for all my book stuff.
Okay, thank you. That's great. You must look at, like, if you reread some of your own books, even like 10 years from now, it must be like a blast from the past where you get to think, like, you have an experience nobody else has when you read your books because of the way, I love that, because of the way you've added these, people and characters and personalities where you can remember these people. They're like, they're placed in time. Yeah,
people I've served with. The Deputy Director of Operations for CIA, Deputy Director of Intelligence for CIA in both my first 3 books, and the first book of the Martini Squad was based on an actual Marine Corps retired Lieutenant General I served with when I was navigator on Bataan. He was then Colonel Bailey, commanding officer of 2nd Marine Regiment. And we took him and his Marines to Iraq and back in 2003. And again, one of the best, finest officers I've ever served with. When I heard he retired a lieutenant general, I'm like, not surprised. Great guy, smart guy. And I remember him really because one day, just out of the blue, I'm walking by his cabin, and he's like, "Hey, Commander Adamcik, come on over here." I go, "Yes, sir." Not often I get called into a Marine colonel's cabin, and he presented me one of his regimental T-shirts. Had the regimental logo on the front, and on the back was Task Force Tarawa, Iraq 2003 on the back. And he's like, "Hey, Commander, I think you're a really professional guy. Love working with you. Here's a memento of our time on board the ship." And it just struck me. It's like, wow, nobody's ever really awesome. Done that before. Yeah. So, in fact, I still have that T-shirt. It's framed in my office. And so when it came time for a very senior agency person, General Bailey was top of my list to make that character. And, of course, I actually tracked him down and talked to him on the phone and sent him a copy.
That's awesome. I love that story. Yes, I love how you do that.
And also, same with the Deputy Director of Operations was named for my commanding officer on John F. Kennedy, Dennis Fitzpatrick, who is now a retired Rear Admiral. And again, outstanding commanding officer. And I'm like, okay, I got to put him in the books as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. For those who are listening, we are about to go into the spoiler section. So I am going to ask a couple of spoiler questions. So if you don't want to know what happens at the end of the book, you may not want to listen to the next.
I'm not listening to Mark right now.
Yeah. You can pause, read the book, come back, and then it won't spoil it for you. So was there any inspiration to at the end of the book, essentially what the main conflict ends in this big kind of airplane parachuting. The PJ comes out and this whole stunt sequence. What was the inspiration behind that?
The idea just came to my head. It's like, what would be a great set piece in a movie? What would I want to see on screen to happen to rescue poor Rafa from the Russians? And I'm like, and of course, again, I got a PJ working here. I'm like, and a SEAL. I'm like, okay, let's do a little air-to-air. Plus, Molly, she is a former naval aviator, and she flew the P-3 Orion maritime patrol craft. It was a large multi-engine prop maritime patrol plane. So I'm like, okay, let's get Molly into the cockpit. Now, why would I want Molly in the cockpit for something? Skydiving. Okay. And then I just kind of progressed that way.
I don't know a lot about planes and aerodynamics and the odds of things. Do you look at like the plausibility of? I kind of see Tom Cruise doing the end of the end of this movie, so to speak. That Mission Impossible jumping plane to plane. Do you think about the plausibility of such a thing? I don't even know how plausible it is or isn't what happened there, but do you consider those things, or are you just, this is a thriller, this is fun?
This particular case, I try to keep it as real as possible. But yeah, there's some dramatic license I took on that one. Okay. I had no idea if you're jumping from one plane to the other, could you actually hold on to the side of the fuselage long enough to plant the little baby explosives to blow the door so you can actually climb on board? I have no idea if that can happen. If it can't, sorry. If it can, okay. Outstanding.
Yeah. Okay. I rock climb, so I'm trying to think of how hard it is to hold on to things, because people sometimes underestimate. When I see Tom Cruise do it, I'm like, yeah, there's no possible way he's holding something like he does in some of the situations that he does, because he has this rock climbing stunts.
Yeah, well, Rogue Nation, when he took off on that Airbus A400, he was definitely holding on to the side of that aircraft, but they had a shield in front of him to help deflect the wind, so he wasn't quite getting buffeted as hard as he would be if it didn't have that.
Sure enough, yeah. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name Xena. Is it Xena? Is that how you pronounce Xena, the antagonist in the book?
Oh,
I said Xena when I was reading it in my brain.
No, that's cool.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. When she dies at the end, Bryce reacts by saying he mourned the loss of his former lover because they have that history together. Then he's quoted as saying, burn in hell more or less. Was it always written that way? And in your view, what does it say? Were you trying to say something about Bryce as his character?
Yeah, I mean, when Bryce first met the later Russian agent, he knew her as somebody completely different. She was Polish, not Russian, and she was an engineering grad student at USC while he was in school. So that's the person he mourned. But the person he later found out she was, and turned out to be, that's the bitch who's burning in hell.
Okay. Was there any moments that you found hard to write in this book? Any scenes that were like emotionally impactful, I guess would be a better question.
Yeah, the stuff about Bryce first discovering that his former girlfriend was actually an SVR operative. That was a little bit hard to write because, he knew her forever as this hot Polish girl that came close to actually marrying before she went back to Poland. And then all of a sudden he's on an op in Slovakia in Bratislava, and he sees her on a monitor shooting a guy in the head. That's if that doesn't give you pause, nothing will.
Yeah, I can't imagine I guess I can imagine what was going through his head because you talked about it in the book, but it's still hard to imagine how I might react to seeing someone you were in love with at one time suddenly assassinate somebody.
Yeah, in cold blood, then steals takes the money back that she just gave him, and then her thugs steal his wallet and his watch. Like I said, the SVR, very, very cheap.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I had for the show. If you don't mind sticking around for a few more minutes for the after show, the rapid fire questions for our Patreon members.
Standing by.
All right, thank you.